Hello, and thank you for joining me again today on the Finding Hope After Loss podcast. Don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss any future episodes. If you like the show, please leave a review or rating on Apple or Spotify. It only takes a moment and really helps the show reach more loss and infertility families. I wanted to give everyone a heads up that the show will be dropping back to just one episode a week, which will come out every Wednesday starting next week. This was the original format of the show, but I had switched to 2 episodes a week due to so many amazing interviews. But don't worry, I'm still going to work really hard to bring you lots more amazing interviews. If you ever have any feedback about the show, like things you want to hear or topics you would like discussed, please feel free to reach out on any of my social media at Journey for Jasmine or email me at sarah@journeyforjasmine.com. Today, I am talking with Marie-Laure. In this episode, she talks about the loss of her daughter, Juliette, who was stillborn due to preeclampsia. She talks about the ways preeclampsia affected her both during and after pregnancy. She also talks about how it was hard to be away from her family during the birth of her daughter, which happened in 2020 during COVID. Hello, everyone. Today, I am here with Marie-Laure. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Hi, yes, I live in St. Louis. I'm a social worker by training and working clinical research at a university and in eating disorder treatment and prevention. That was my first passion, and I'm excited. It's part of a job I love, and of course, my experience digged a bit about that passion into new passions. But yeah, I have a husband and a almost 2-year old, and we have a 4-year-old daughter who passed away due to preeclampsia, and she did not survive labor. Yeah, and otherwise, I have 2 cats that are our first babies, right? I'm a big aerialist. I love aerial art and practice silks on my spare time.
That's so cool. That's something I've always been so impressed by, like watching people do it. My daughter, my older daughter, she's in gymnastics, and so they would have like a class up there doing it. And I'm like, they're just like climbing up there. I'm like, I can't do that, but it looks so cool.
It is so fun. It is so fun, and it humbles you after a pregnancy or two to go back.
Is it something that's like hard to do, or do you get the hang of it pretty quick?
It's hard.
Yeah.
It is hard. It's a lot of strength, but you work at it. Like it's like everything you can. It's doable. I always did sports, but I was not the most like athletic person in the world, and I was able to get to a level I was happy with. And I think that's what matters, right? Doing something that makes you happy, that's a workout, and that
All right,
create
maybe I'll
a
have to
lot of.
try it.
Yeah, you should. I think you should. I mean, we see people in their 40s, 50s starting, and it's really fun.
So, do you mind sharing a little bit about your story?
Yes, of course. So my story, and it's also the story of my daughter. I like to say that because sharing is sharing her and is sharing her story. So we got pregnant for the first time, and we found out end of February 2020. So as you can imagine, like few weeks before the world that completely shut down. And it was fine after, we made sure that the I would still get OBGYN care, that I would not give birth alone in my bathtub. I was terrified of that. Actually, our OBGYN clinic never shut down. They stopped like gynecology appointment, but never obstetric appointment. They made sure like they continued to see everyone, which was not a given everywhere. All my appointments were all in person. There was no online appointment, which again, like a lot of people at that time did a lot of virtual appointments. So we felt very safe, very comfortable. It's like a pregnancy that not many people see you, but it was nice to kind of live this in private. And now with like insight, I'm like, wow, I wish more people had seen me pregnant. And I kind of missed all the opportunity of like photos and whatnot. But and normal pregnancy was until 20 weeks. We had an anatomy scan and everything looked good except that our daughter measured small. They put her in the 8th percentile. And they weren't too worried about it. They were like, every child has their own growth. We were both small babies at birth, so they were like, okay, maybe that's it. We had done the NIPT test. Everything looked good with that. So really they were like, just come back in 4 weeks. We'll do a growth ultrasound. And, I, of course, looked up what it meant, a small baby, and started freaking out. And I was like, okay, I can't do this. And everybody in my family, we have a grandma that was like really, really short. So I was like, oh, remember great grandma? She was really short. And, it's like everything is minimized and everything's going to be great. And then around 22 weeks, I started having like swelling in my legs. I started throwing up again. I have started having shortness of breath. And for every symptoms I had, I made an excuse. I threw up most of my pregnancy. I threw up for 10 weeks of pregnancy in the first and second trimester. So it's like, it's, that's just how I do pregnancy. This is what my body is. It's July in St. Louis. And for people who don't know about July in St. Louis, it's incredibly humid and hot. So of course, walking outside is hard, and I'm pregnant, and so shortness of breath. You find it's okay. Swelling in the legs. Well, it's St. Louis. It's summer. I get swelling. I didn't know. I didn't know what any of this meant, so I completely disregarded all my symptoms, thinking it was normal. I did have an appointment at 23 weeks with an OBGYN, and I brought it up. I also had weight increase at that point. They had protein in my urine from the test at the doctor's office. And so I brought up the throwing up again and the swelling, and she told me my blood pressure was okay. So she told me just, work out every day. It's like, okay. And then asked question about the growth of the baby, if like that's something, what that meant. And she said, every baby have their own growth. So as long as they continue growing, you'll be fine. You'll see next week. So we didn't think fanything of it. Felt reassured that everything was gonna be fine. And a week later, we had a growth ultrasound, and this is when, they weren't really communicative during the ultrasound. For anyone who has bad ultrasound may know, like the texts tend to be pretty quiet, or I forgot what we talked about, but random things. And at some point, like someone else came in and I didn't even think twice about it. I felt, it's like looking back, like I was so naive. And then I'm like, oh yeah, there's somebody else is there. Why not? But I did see like on the screen, they show based on the size of your baby, the gestational age. And he showed, I was 24 weeks at that point, and he showed 21 weeks. And I knew like that told me something's not right. I didn't know what that meant, but I knew like, okay, my baby did not grow. It's still growth restricted. And then they let us wait in the room after the ultrasound. And I remember telling, it was at 9 a.m. And I told him, the plan was like, we'll go to the ultrasound, go back to work. And at that point, I told my husband, like, if something's wrong, take the day off. But you start thinking that way, but you don't understand what something wrong is. Like, what is something wrong? I have no idea, but it felt something was wrong. They were taking too much time. And then they came back into the room and they told us to go to labor and delivery. Well, they'll be able to better take care of us. They'll have more testing, and we'll have a plan, and to maybe be prepared to spend the night. And that made no sense. And again, it's like how naive I was, like in my head, I'm like, okay, maybe I'll spend a night. Like, I don't understand what's going on. I don't know. I just, I left that room crying. Like I knew something was wrong. I knew there was something with my baby that was not right, but I had no idea what it meant. And I never imagined that it meant my baby was gonna die. So we went to labor and delivery, and we were seen immediately. Took my blood pressure, and it was 190 over something, which is really, really high. 140 over 90s minimum, like as high as you want it to be for a pregnant person. And so they talked to me about preeclampsia, and I'm like, do you know what preeclampsia is? And I'm like, yeah, I watched Downton Abbey. Like, When a character dies from eclampsia, like, okay, yeah, that's what I really truly knew of it. And I didn't know it could be that early in pregnancy. Besides the swelling in the legs, I didn't really know of any symptoms of preeclampsia. And so they moved me in from like the triage to a room really, really quickly. And they, and again, they weren't telling me anything. They're like, you'll be on a one-on-one nurse, so she'll be able to take really good care of you. And everybody was nice. I just didn't know what was going on. And then, you go from like nobody telling you anything to like two teams of doctor, pediatrician, OBGYN coming into your rooms, like 8 people in my room suddenly. And they're telling me, do you know about preeclampsia? Have you ever heard of preeclampsia? Like, you're not leaving this hospital pregnant. This is like, can be very dangerous. You have preeclampsia with severe features without really understanding what that even meant. And I had very high level of proteins. I had very high blood pressure. My baby was growth restricted. So all of that was like adding on to the severity of the preeclampsia. And then pediatrician, started talking about like, if your baby is born today. And I'm at a level 4 NICU. Like, I mean, this is like the top hospital, top at Children's Hospital is like number 5 in the country. Like, we not talking about like a small country hospital. Like, this is like where you want to be if something's not gonna go right. And they're telling me we're not sure we have tubes small enough for your baby. If your baby is born today, they're probably not going to survive. If they survive birth and they leave this room, if, big ifs, they may never be able to walk, talk, breathe on their own, talk, like go to the bathroom, do anything. And so, it's like everything comes to everything at once. Everything is thrown at you, and it's like the whole world opened up underneath us. And that weekend, this was a Monday, that weekend, my husband and I were like arguing about the color of the bedroom, right? These were the decision we should be making as parents, the colors. And then suddenly it's like, what are we saying and what are we doing? And they're like, well, we'll do a C-section and do all these things, and nothing made sense. And until my OBGYN finally came in a couple hours later, and she explained everything. She sat down with us and we took the time, and we made a plan together. And the plan was for me to stay pregnant as long as we could, in the hope that we could make it to 28 weeks as a start. And then 34 weeks would have been my limit, no matter what, to give a chance for our daughter. And I was responding very well to the medication, so it was very hopeful. And we did have to make decisions though, for her health, for her care, since we decided that I would stay pregnant, we knew that there could be risk for her, like because of her small size, because my placenta was not giving her the blood and oxygen that she required. It would stop and go. That's what the placenta was doing, stop and go, the blood flow. We had to decide. Yeah, my husband and I had to make a decision about, like, given the information about her life and her quality of life, what do we do? And we had an amazing pediatrician fellow that sat with us and helped explain everything to us, and really told us like, we'll always be parents. And she, it's like, we were with her for an hour. She was with us for an hour of like holding our hands and letting us cry. And we decided that out of love for our daughter, and that if she were to be born and it was as grim as they said, then we would do palliative care, because I didn't want her to suffer. I didn't want her to be probed and poked and all these things and taken away from us if she's going to live for a couple hours. I just could not imagine putting her through pain knowing she wasn't going to survive. And so that was the decision. And making that decision actually bought us a week of pregnancy. We were able to stay pregnant for an extra week, which was all I could want for, I was we were hopeful. We were, they responded so well to the medication that they were started thinking maybe it's not preeclampsia. Maybe you have a kidney disease. And that's like the weirdest thing you can, because suddenly we're like, yes, that would be amazing. Like, can I have a kidney disease, please? Like, yes, that's what I want. Because nephrology came in, like the nephrologist, and she was like, oh, if it's a kidney disease, we can like put you on this medication, it can help. And you felt like things were turning around, that there was hope. But a week later, and of all the days, that was my birthday, I had an ultrasound to check on her growth. And then at this point, the placenta, the blood flow was now reversing. So she was really not getting what she needed. And for her, it was a matter of days. And the preeclampsia was actually progressing. And I was getting worse and worse. And they were really worried about my health. So that day on my birthday, the final decision was made that I would give birth. And right now we're deciding on palliative care, but of course, with the idea of things could change. And my doctor did tell me she didn't want to induce me on my birthday. And I did appreciate that, although still not the birthday you want. And that was something in my healing I had to work on, learning to accept my birthday again for myself. And so the next day I was induced, and I was in labor for 48 hours. My body was really not ready to give birth. I wasn't ready to give birth. I felt that, I felt I didn't want to be active in knowing that if I gave birth to her, she was going to die. And that was too much for me. And, I think I do think it's some body mind connection. And the second day of labor, we found out she had passed away. So that was a bit of a relief for me, in the sense of, again, like I didn't have to be such an active participant in her death. It didn't really make it easy, right? Because it's, still the guilt of my own body, not able to do that. But yeah, we had, and so I gave birth to her. She was stillborn, and we were able to spend, the time with her. And it's just such a hard and magical time at the same time. It was a beautiful time to see her, to be with her, to sing to her, do the little things we hope for. And luckily they lifted some not lifted some restriction, but they made some exception in my hospital, where they let my mother-in-law come in to see the baby. Because again, July 2020, so not much no many option, not much option. And then I stayed in the hospital for a few more days, started having new symptoms, struggling to breathe, and they still discharged me from the hospital. I started coughing really bad, and everybody was worried it was COVID. And so my hospital had a hotline where we would call, and they would triage you over the phone. And this was about 4 days after I gave birth, 4 or 5 days, and I waited to call that hotline all night long for like, they opened at 7 a.m. and I was like coughing and coughing. I couldn't sleep. It was awful, and I really truly didn't know what it was, and I was lost appetite. I was really in bad shape, and I called the hotline and stayed 5 minutes with the nurse on the phone. She was like, "You just gave birth. You're really short of breath. I want you to go to the hospital right now. I'm worried you have a lung embolism." And so we go to the ER like they tell us to do, which I found out later I should not have gone to the ER, but gone to the labor and delivery again, which you don't know. It's your first child. You have no idea. So I went to the ER. Luckily, they took me in right away, but then I was said COVID. So everything went into, like, my room was like, all the protection and all the hazard and everything were up. My husband was able to be with me at this time, and I was only suspected COVID because at the time it took a really long time to get the test back. and I was coughing, had a fever. They were able to do a chest x-ray that showed I have pneumonia. So there was like a lot of symptoms of COVID in there. And because of this, they moved me to the COVID unit. And at that point, I was no longer able to be with my husband. And we're talking a week after losing our daughter, right? We had to say goodbye to each other without knowing like what was going on. We would see each other again. And that was really hard. Like it was awful. I still have trauma from COVID because of that. I'm still like one of those people we wear their mask everywhere because of this experience. So they moved me to that unit and we found out that I did not have COVID. So that was good. I was told that if I had COVID, I would have been a very sad statistic given how my health was. And the biggest thing is I had heart failure, what they call peripartum cardiomyopathy, which is pregnancy-induced heart failure. And that's a complication that can happen with preeclampsia. And it was one of these things, like it's like felt like this preeclampsia is this awful gift that keeps on giving, like, and it's like it took everything from me, my daughter, my health. And it just felt in that moment, I can't do pregnancy. I can't, my body is not meant to do this. And I had an incredible team of doctors, like cardiologists who specialized in this disease, which is so it's a rare one, and it's not, I would say not common instead of rare. It's not common, and most cardiologists don't even know, they're not trained about it. And we had someone who was specialized in this, and it's like I felt like a gift from my daughter, and I have an incredible team of doctors. I was able to recover and heal, and within 6 months I felt back to myself physically, and that was like amazing to have that. And we were able to go on and have another pregnancy that was watched so carefully, so carefully. Everybody was like crossing their fingers and holding their breath with us, like all the doctors, everybody. And our son was born not without complication, because we did have PPROM with him at 35 weeks, but very different situation. And he was yeah, we had this healthy rainbow baby who's now like 20 months old.
Yeah, oh, you have been through just so much. Just, and that's just not ever how you expect pregnancy to be. Like you just think, okay, I'm gonna have this positive test, have this baby. I mean,
Right.
and
Yeah.
then, face both your daughter and your health being at risk.
Right. Right. And I think you're right. Like I never imagined pregnancy going this way. And I knew of miscarriage. My mom had a miscarriage. So I knew, that that can happen. And then once, you pass 10, 12 weeks, you're like, okay, like we did the NIPT. Okay, everything's good. Everything's great. And you don't think of what else can go wrong in pregnancy. And actually called my sister before I was pregnant. She has three kids, and I was like, well, similar DNA, right? So how was your pregnancy? So I kind of have an idea of what to expect. And she had, like the same as me, morning sickness, and she did have gestational diabetes in one, but overall, like very normal pregnancies and without many complications. And so I was like, oh, then I'm good. I never imagined ever that this would be us. And having, before I got pregnant, same thing, my husband and I had the conversation, and based on like what you see on TV, right? Like my life or the life of the baby.
Mhm.
And like on TV, on these medical shows, it's always like very clear you can only save one. But it's not like, what we realize is this is not how it works. Like it was never my life or the life of my baby. It was always like, do we have two deaths or do we have one? My baby would not survive without me. If I died, she would have died. And me living is, it did not, even then, like I tried to stay pregnant. I tried for her. I really did. And it brought my health in such a, it damaged my health to try and stay pregnant longer. But she died because the placenta was so bad. And it was never her or me. it was just pregnancy. I mean, we know, right? Pregnancy can be deadly and yeah, things we never imagined.
Yeah, definitely. Those medical shows, like, and I know we all watch them and we're all like, sucked into them, but it's like, wow, that then you learn like that's really not how things happen.
Exactly. Oh, I get so upset with this medical shows. No, we actually like if we're watching one, like skip this type of episode because I'm like, I can handle it. Like, and for the longest time, that's how we were very black and white, right? That's how we think.
Well, it's hard not to. That's like that's all you see. You don't ever hear about the gray areas or the things that go wrong because
Right.
they don't want to scare people or whatever.
Yes.
But
Don't
then
want
we don't know what's going on. And the fact that you were sent to the hospital and nobody told you what was happening, and I mean that shouldn't have happened.
Right. And yeah, we should be educated on symptoms of preeclampsia, symptom of other diseases, of counting the kicks, all of these things. Like that is my biggest disappointment in everything. Is like how we don't know. Nobody tells us because pregnancy is this beautiful time for you to enjoy, and it's everything's gonna be fine. Women today are fine. And it's like, are we fine in a country with like the the highest maternal death? Like, are we really fine? And yet we're not told about symptoms because why worry us? And I do believe education is power and not scaring people away. Just like being like, if any of these signs happen to you, please come to see us or some explanation without. I think we're not fragile little things, women. Like we can take on hard truth and we've done this for everything else.
Well, and I think, like you were talking about, I know I do this. I know a lot of people do this, that we have symptoms, but we write them off as being something, oh, I don't need to go in for that. It's just I walked too much today. I did, whatever. And but yeah, if we have those signs, like we need to know, just call because that's what they're there for.
Yes, you never bother your doctor. Like that's something I had to repeat to myself. Like I'm not bothering them. I'm not bothering them because the reason like I diminished my symptoms, like, oh, I'm not going to bother the doctor with this or the hospital. I don't want to be like taking up time when more things are happening. And in my second pregnancy, when I met with my maternal fetal medicine doctor, and I was like, when should I come in? When should what's my like, this is going on, go to the hospital. And they told me, if you are worried, we are worried. We want to see you. Like there was no limits. Like, and they were like, come in whenever. And I did not go in a lot actually in my second pregnancy, only went in once. I've had times when I was like, I want to go in, but it was just like I could tell it was anxiety. But yeah, I don't think he makes us high utilizer to be like trusting your instinct or going in. I mean, even if you go every week to be reassured, like it's better they send you on your way and be like everything's fine than they find something really like they prefer to send you on your way, everything being fine, than find
Right.
something wrong with your baby or you. So
I know during my pregnancy after last, so I'm like, can you just monitor me 24/7? Like, just keep the ultrasound on. I just need to know everything's okay.
and I always joke like I'll live in the hospital for 9 months. Like that's fine, I'll move in.
I know. I think a lot of us would too. So I know that you mentioned earlier when we were talking that you're originally from France. So I'm guessing that your family wasn't here. Was
That's right.
that hard for you?
That was really hard actually, because my family was not allowed to come to the United States at that time because COVID. So everything was closed and the borders were closed. And we tried to have my mom come, and the embassy or like in France were telling us that was impossible and she could not. They may have been ways, but we weren't sure, like maybe she could have gone to Mexico, or but then it's like, what if you're banned for 10 plus years from because they don't, we weren't really sure how that worked. And that's, I moved to the United States about 20 years ago. And when I moved, you're like, okay, worst comes to worst, it's a plane ride away. If something happens, we not that far. I mean, it's far, but it's like a day of travel and then we home and we can be together. And it's always been something, we always keep the money for a plane ticket in the bank account and type thing. And that was the first time like something was really wrong and we could not fly. Neither of us could be there. And I know that was, harder for my parents than it was, of course, for me, because your parents watching you, their baby go through this and not knowing what to do and how to take care of us. And I mean, yeah, that was really hard to be alone in. And my husband and his mom was there, luckily, but my mom wasn't. I and then you grieve alone, right? Like this whole nobody was near me for COVID. With COVID, we couldn't have a funeral. So we did like a memorial online. I mean, it had an impact on the pregnancy loss. And like, for example, the hospital used to have volunteer photographers for taking, like to take photos of the baby and you and the baby. And we didn't have that because it was COVID. And so the nurses took pictures. They had a camera and they took pictures, and my doula was there and she took pictures. And we had, so we have these things, but it's not to the extent that it could have been because of COVID. And I'm okay with it, but at the same time, like I wish I had pretty pictures. I wish I had a photographer telling me like taking pretty pictures of us as a family, because they did their best, but they took a photo of her and they have some posed really nice pictures for her, but not really of us as a family or things you don't think about. I wish someone had told me like bring a clothes for her or a teddy bear or something that she can keep with her, and all these little things that we didn't really have. And yeah, it was definitely a challenging time not having my family here. And what made it challenging was the situation more so than the distance.
Yeah. COVID messed up everything. Like,
It messed up
it's
everything.
like it made loss, which is already a horrible situation, that much harder. People who couldn't have their spouse there with them, or like you, if you had COVID, I mean, luckily you didn't, but being isolated and right after your loss, without your husband, without your family, it's just,
Exactly. Yeah. And my husband was not allowed to go in for ultrasounds with me. So it's like, well, all these ultrasounds and time when I saw her, he didn't, we would FaceTime, for him to look at the baby. But that was kind of like, he was able to go to the last two ultrasound and that was it. But yeah, it's like all these like moments of taken away from him because of COVID and the restriction. And I understand why they had these, in place, and it's a health crisis and we do what we can and whatever. But yeah, it definitely had
yeah, I understand,
impacts.
but we can still not like it, right?
Right, exactly.
So I know you mentioned earlier too that you weren't, I mean, like you kind of knew what preeclampsia was, but not really. Have you met other people who have gone through that
Before or after?
after?
After, yes, I've become very involved in the community with the Preeclampsia Foundation. And yes, I actually started meeting a lot of people. And at first, there was a lot of people who had preeclampsia later in pregnancies. So after 32, 33 weeks. And what I started seeing was a lot of people talk about, NICU and preemies and or even like later 39 weeks, like preeclampsia. And I didn't find myself in these stories because I had preeclampsia so early and my daughter died because of it. There was no success story for us out of the NICU. She weighed 14 ounces at birth. So she was not even a pound. And so, even babies born at 25 weeks like her, usually they're over a pound, and when they go to the NICU, and very different stories. And that's what kind of like got me even more involved, I think, in the communities, because I was like, I want to tell a story like mine. I want to tell like I had preeclampsia early. My daughter died from it and we had to make decisions. And that was like the part to me was like, I had to make decisions about her health. Like it wasn't just I don't want to say just a stillbirth because it's horrible, but like it wasn't, it felt like there's more to it than just stillbirth. There is that decision piece that I have to live with that is hard for me. And I was like where I couldn't like connect everything at first. And so I did more work and looked more into the community and started meeting women that had similar stories and met also had babies who died. And yeah, so I started, and now I'm hosting the St. Louis Promise Walk for Preeclampsia for the Preeclampsia Foundation to bring more awareness, to meet more of these people and see more of these, hear more of these stories and hoping like people can learn about preeclampsia because I started and I'm the type of person like when something happens to me I need to understand and I need to learn. So actually one of the organization called End Preeclampsia has like a whole modules, like tons of modules on like what it is, how to prevent it in future pregnancies, like the rest. They also have people sharing their stories about just at gestational age when they have the preeclampsia for outcome. And that was amazing to learn so much about this disease. And that really helped me like heal. And I think to me, like I talk about, I'm passionate about eating disorders and this new, like, after everything that happened to me, is like my passion has shifted, like the preeclampsia and peripartum cardiomyopathy and pregnancy and infant loss, all of these things. Like, I'm like, we need to bring awareness to all these issues. So I'm doing some work in that. Brings healing to me.
I think that's amazing that you're doing all of that, though. When is the walk?
The walk is going to be September 14th, 2025. So I hosted my first on September 1st, 2024, which was really exciting to put together. And, everything I do is in honor of my daughter, right? And her name is Juliette. I never mentioned her name. Like today, her name is Juliette and everything I do is for her. And so putting that walk together and we were decorating, there was like a balloon arch and some balloons. And I was like, I feel like I'm doing a birthday party for her. Which was really nice to do. And then so met some people there who also want to, had preeclampsia and someone was interesting because a couple had a baby also born around 24, 25 weeks. And I think the baby was 7 months old. But with such severe prematurity, they looked like they were 2 months old. And it was like just trying to like in this moment to be like, well, this could have been us, this could have been our daughter, like this is maybe what it would have looked like. And yeah, and it's always something to see the different stories of like similar diseases. And I think the organizations do a good job like remembering the babies who die of preeclampsia and not just saying like, oh, 39 weeks, everything's fine, or you have a smaller baby because they're 36 weeks, they go a day in the NICU or whatever they do. I think a really good job like talking about all the different types of preeclampsia because you can also have postpartum preeclampsia. And I think a lot of people don't know that it can happen 6 weeks postpartum.
I didn't even realize it could happen that long after.
And I think, we think, oh, the baby's out, everything's fine. And same thing with peripartum cardiomyopathy. It can be diagnosed, I think, up to 6 months or a year after pregnancy.
Pregnancy is kind of scary when you think about it. It can do so many. It's like even a normal, I say normal pregnancy can be so hard on your body
Right. Right. Pregnancy
without
is
any
hard on
complications. And then
pregnancy is
adding
hard
that.
on the body, like period.
Yeah.
Yeah, my OBGYN said it this way. She's like, pregnancy is a really good way of testing your body, and it shows ahead of time what could go wrong. And with, if maybe these things with the heart failure, maybe in 20 years, I would have had heart failure, or preeclampsia is linked with it's cardiovascular. And so the risk of someone who had preeclampsia is two out of three women who had preeclampsia will die of a cardiovascular disease.
Oh,
And so it shows like, okay, like that tells something, right? And that's another thing. You leave the hospital, you had preeclampsia, and nobody tells you that. Nobody tells you these risks. Nobody tells you like go see a cardiologist. Make sure your doctors know about this. Like everybody wants to get off the medicine. Everybody, and I'm on medicine for life. My blood pressure is great. and without the medicine, but I have heart failure. So it's preventive. And I'm like, if that's what I need to do to like live longer and not die of a heart attack young, I'll take it. Like
Yeah.
I'll take my little pill every day. It's okay.
Yeah, like it's a small thing to do. Like
Small thing to do.
that's crazy to me though that they didn't even tell you any, again, no information after you leave too. Like, all right, you're cured, go home.
Right.
Yep.
They give you, yeah, they gave me like the list of symptoms, like, the hemorrhage, and they did have some symptom for preeclampsia, and the nurse goes over it. But I, I think we have to put ourselves in like the shoes of the person receiving that information. You just lost a baby. You have like a life-threatening illness. The nurse is talking, but are you really like paying close attention? And your partner who's with you also just lost a baby and almost lost like their partner. They're not paying attention the way, like, I don't know. And I don't know how to change that, right? Like, how do we maybe appointments, like more doctor appointments after a loss, to make sure people are being checked on. And that's one thing I have great respect for my medical team. My primary care physician called me after I was discharged from the hospital, and to express his sense, his condolences, and check in on me, and he made an appointment to see me. I think it was 2 weeks later or something, and I went back. In the meantime, in between, I went back to the hospital, and I was discharged like the day before my appointment with him. And his office called me, and they were like, "Do you want to reschedule? You're just leaving the hospital." And I was like, "No, no, I want to see him." Like I want, because then I have health anxiety now for very good reasons. And I was like, especially at that time, I was like, I want to see the doctor. And they made another exception, letting my husband in to visit with me because COVID. And he was like, telling us like there was no way he would have not allowed him in. He was like, I want to see both of you. He's both of our doctors. And yeah, and going over everything that happened with me. And we actually had monthly meeting with my primary care physician to go over any new results or anything. Then there were virtual call check-ins, see how I was doing. And that I felt very supported by the medical team. And that's a blessing, because I know sadly not everybody can say that.
Yeah, most people just kind of get their one visit and all right, come back when you're pregnant again.
Right,
Like,
right,
okay.
right. And it may have been that way if I didn't have the heart failure on top of it. I know I had like OB/GYN appointments sooner also than the 6 weeks or whatever, but after that, what got me up in the morning after we lost our daughter was my doctor's appointments at cardiac rehab. And my my OB/GYN told me to take my medicine like be 12 hours apart. And so I was like 9 a.m. to 9 p.m., to get and I was so rigid about it. I was like 9 a.m. And that got me out of bed. It's like these little things in grief. It's like if that's what's gonna get me out of bed, that's
Sometimes
what it
we just
is.
need those things to focus on, just something else to
Right.
take us away from like the constant grief we're living in.
Right. And I mean, it was not magic, right? I would take my medicine and then I would go sit on the couch and not being able to do anything but cry, right? But it's still like, as you say, like got me moving.
Yeah, and I mean, I think getting up, I mean, that's a big thing when you just
Right.
lost a baby. So,
Having to shower to go to the doctor. That's not like, yeah, finding these things that forces you to
mm,
get out and moving. And I know some people go back to work pretty soon after, like the same idea. Yeah.
I was one of those, and I mean, partially because I didn't have like paid time off, but partially also because I just wanted to be normal again. And in hindsight, it was too soon. But, you just do like what you think is best at the time.
Right. Oh, isn't that the whole thing? We do with the information we have, and we do what we can. And yeah.
And then, later we overanalyze and go, why did I do that? Why didn't I do this?
So much overanalyzing and everything. And I don't know if you did this, but the overanalyzing, like I overanalyzed my life after the loss
Hmm.
to see where I went wrong, what I did wrong, like what did I do to deserve this? Was like looking at my life and like, okay, is this like the one time I didn't know one of my friend was pregnant and she had just found out her baby had, I think it was trisomy 18 or something, and she had to get a TFMR and termination for medical reason. And it was my birthday party, and she kept being like, "When are you gonna have kids? When are you gonna have kids? When are you gonna have kids?" And I was like, "Well, when are you gonna have a second?" And her face completely changed, and I didn't know she had the news like she was gonna lose her baby. And in my head, I was like, "Is that because of this moment? Is it because I said, it's like every little thing that you like feel guilty over." I'm like, yeah, I'm being punished, right? That I did something wrong. And yeah, I
I
remember.
definitely did that too. Every little thing, like, oh, I was really mean that one time, or I I don't know, like maybe I'm too selfish, or maybe I'm too, I don't know, all the things.
Right. And in the end, we're like, no, we good people. Like we do our best. Like, and nobody deserves this. Nobody deserves this. There's nothing we did or didn't do to deserve this.
Yeah.
And
It's hard to come to that like reality though. I mean, we're always looking for something to blame, and ourselves is the easiest to blame.
oh yeah. And our bodies, right? Especially, we're women and we live in this culture that blames our body for everything. So why not add on to that? Yeah. Yeah. Finding, yeah, the understanding. And I think maybe that's why I went into like learning about preeclampsia, because I had to understand why this happened. And, preeclampsia, they don't really know why it happens. And they have some theory with the placenta and the implementation of the placenta. And that's why you take baby aspirin to prevent it. But there's not really a like one theory of this. Is like something maybe the father DNA play a part. And so there's a lot of theories out there, but
Yeah, I would definitely be like you, like, I need answers. Give me the answers.
yeah, yeah. And it's, I think it's a healthier way than blaming myself and everything I may have said wrong. And like, okay, let's look at science. I mean, I work in research and just like, let me look at science. Let me look at what's been said. Yeah.
You're like, science is factual. It doesn't lie. It just is what it is, right?
Right. And it's like, it's different people, different theories. And yeah, it's based on, yeah, factual, as you said. And I mean, it's the same thing, like this experience. I mean, I was very much into modern medicine before, but like now I'm even more into like modern medicine save lives. Like, is it perfect? No. But can we continue improving it? Yes. But yes, it definitely doing what the doctors do what they do for a reason. And yeah, and again, I know I'm privileged to have a medical team I trust, but it's, I would joke with my doctor. I'm like, if they tell me to jump, I'll just say how like you're like they always say like you're the most compliant patient we have. I got scared.
I'm sure they're not used to that, right? They have everybody like arguing with them. No, I'm not taking that medicine, or I'm not doing that. You're like, sure, sign me up.
Yeah, I'm like, yeah, another medicine. Why not? Like, if it's preventative, and actually, my primary care was like, well, it might be good. Your blood pressure is great. Maybe we can think about taking you off your blood pressure medication. And I'm like, no, I like them. Like,
I'm okay.
I'm on the lowest dose, and I'm like, probably not. But I'm like, if it's preventative, I want it. Like,
Don't mess with what works, right?
right, I don't want to take a risk.
So, is there anything else that you'd like to share or add?
I think what we're talking about, like people, I think we do all do our best and in healing and grieving and trying to grasp this new reality. And I know like people can find your podcast in many, many different ways. And for many different reasons. But I think like saying again, like nothing that was done is not your fault, right? It's never the person's fault. And I think we can do a better job educating women and pregnant people on pregnancy and the risk, and education is power. I really truly believe that. Like that's something that came back a lot. Like if I had known, I wish I had known. Like maybe at my first symptom, I would have advocated for me and my baby and be like, no, no, no. I don't think working out every day is gonna do it. Like there's something wrong. I read about preeclampsia. I had six, 5 or 7. I can't even remember exactly without counting them, but indicator that I had preeclampsia. And like if I had known all of this, I could have been like, okay, I have all these things actually. And I don't think it's summer in St. Louis. I don't think it's like I'm throwing up again. That's a big sign. Like maybe I would have taken my blood pressure more, and not just because blood pressure fluctuates throughout the day. So you can have high blood pressure and then another reading might show lower, but then, another one might show higher again. That's why they take your blood pressure every 2 hours when you have preeclampsia. And so yeah, I wish, knowing these things and giving advocating for us and our babies, and more tests, more ways to find out. So yeah, that's a big thing I hope to see changing, is seeing education awareness and all this.
Well, I want to thank you so much for coming on today and sharing your story with us.
Thank you so much for having me and talking with me today.
Thank you so much, Marie-Laure, for sharing your story with us. I have heard so many stories from women who have preeclampsia that were just dismissed or who didn't realize how serious it was until something really drastic happened. This is definitely an area that I agree needs more education for every single woman who goes through pregnancy. We all need to be warned of what signs to look out for and not just told that it's just about high blood pressure. Personally, I would rather be overeducated on something that may never happen than undereducated and then caught off guard when it did happen to me. And I feel like a lot of parents who have gone through loss would feel the same way. We now know all the things that can happen, and we know the importance of the education and knowing the things that we need to look out for. Again, it all comes down to what type of doctor you have. Some are amazing and great about sharing information like this. Others brush past it with just a brief mention. And we talk about this a lot on the show, but you really do have to be your own biggest advocate. Don't be afraid to ask for information. It really could just end up saving your life. Don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss any future episodes. If you like the show, please leave a review or rating on Apple or Spotify. It only takes a moment and really helps the show reach more loss and infertility families. Thank you so much for tuning in, and remember, we are all in this together.